Thank you for joining us for another episode of Ask the RFP Doctor, brought to you by the Center for Procurement Excellence. We're a nonprofit membership organization dedicated to helping you streamline your RFP process through better education, smarter strategies, and more transparency. As a member, you'll get access to exclusive training, discounts to our virtual and in-person events, and the chance to connect with other procurement professionals throughout the year. And if you're planning a professional event or conference, don't forget our CPE Speakers Bureau is available to speak at regional and national gatherings. Now let's get into today's session of Ask the RFP Doctor, where one of our expert RFP doctors will show you how to take on real-world challenges in procurement and supply chain management and break them down into practical strategies you can use right away.
Welcome to Ask the RFP Doctor, CPE's monthly web series where we discuss the latest best practices in procurement and supply chain management.
Welcome, everybody. So today we're doing a little bit more advanced topic. Not everyone will be able to do this, most likely, but we're going to talk about this idea of releasing more control to the vendors or suppliers and give them this opportunity to, in a way, create their own scope or their own contract structure. So it's not something that's suitable for every client type or organization or every project. So it's definitely a special weapon, let's say, in your arsenal. So we're going to talk a little bit about how folks have done this, what's fair, what's legal, especially within the rules of public procurement, and how do you actually make this happen. We'll go through a couple examples so you can kind of see the context of this. So next slide, Jake. So again, this is a warning. This can make things worse. So I'll give you a few examples as we move through here, but it is not always going to be something that brings value. So you really need to have the right temperature in the room to be able to do something. It's pretty innovative. There's a lot of political risk sometimes when you do this. So we'll talk a little bit about that as well. So I just want to say this is not something that's going to be universally applicable. So what percent of our solicitations, our statements, or scope of works are 100% accurate? Usually people will say 0%, and Kirby just popped up faster than I could say it. So there's always going to be mistakes, right? We're never going to know everything or have it totally dialed in, especially in the time constraints we have. Most folks are understaffed nowadays. Next slide, Jake. So a more important question is, who should know more about how to actually do or deliver or produce what we're buying? Should the client know, the internal user, or should the vendor? And Ben is, again, you guys are too fast. Jake, this could be a 6-minute presentation. It's we propose the vendor, Jake, next slide. The event's more important for the vendor to know what they should do than it is for the client to know what the vendor should do. Okay, and you've probably seen these slides before, I'm guessing, right, Jake? So we know with minimums, any given point in time, there's going to be different capability in the market. Vendor 1, high performing, low risk or low probability of problems. If you hire them, vendor 4, low performing team, they're going to send you, higher risk of problems if you hire them. If you select based on price only, or price is the main differentiator in the selection. So I've seen selections for price is only 10% of the weight, but on the other 90%, the scores are 89, 88, and 87. So price really is the deciding factor. So typically, if price is a major component or is heavily weighted, or the other evaluation criteria aren't good, they're just generic and allow high levels of equal scoring, you will see a compression towards the minimum or whatever the scope is asking for. And that's because vendors need to increase their chance of winning the job, so they have to lower their cost and give as close to the minimum scope requirements, spec, whatever it is, as possible. Jake, next slide. And so from an owner's organization, we look at these requirements as minimums the contract terms, the scope, nothing less than. And then from a vendor's perspective, they'll look at those as maximums. If they give you anything beyond what you've written in terms of your statement of work or your requirements or the quality level or the speed, the cost of doing that comes out of their profit. And we just assume that the two understandings of the expectation of the requirement are the same, but usually they're not. There's usually some gaps in expectations between what the client thinks they're buying and what the vendor thinks they're selling. Next slide, Jake. So when we get into a vendor-generated solution, next, Jake, what we're looking to do is remove the minimum requirements as an option. So they will still exist in the base competition. But if we remove it, the hope is at least one of the marketplace, of the proposers, will have either experience or innovative ideas that allow performance to exceed our expectations in a significant manner. And we're trying to create the opportunity. So if we're trying to buy a green circle, we're trying to create the opportunity, next slide, Jake, where if someone truly has innovative ideas, they're given a mechanism in our procurement process to bring that value to the organization in a way that's legal, competitive, but still allows all the laws and rules to be met. Okay, next slide. So in most places we've worked, the solicitation can request optional, non-evaluated, non-scored submission material, where everyone's allowed the same opportunity to submit something, but it's not part of the base evaluation of who actually wins the project. The submissions should still be limited in page length. This should not be a way to get around other efficient practices espoused by CPE. And the goal is to allow the marketplace, the vendors, the proposers, the suppliers, et cetera, to create value for the client in a way that has not been done in the preceding agreements. A lot of these contracts are typically, they've been doing things a certain way before. It's not the first time they've done them. And you're looking for some more innovative practices. So next slide, Jake. So traditional non-scored criteria could be a plan, a schedule. There's a whole bunch of them. And this is separate from like any forms or just base requirements that have to be submitted. Another one to add is a vendor-generated solution. And this could be how they approach or deliver something. It could be part of the financial model. It could be the contract structure. It could be all three. I've run ones where it's just the financial structure. I've run ones where it's just the approach. I've run ones where it's certain technology. This does not replace, so requesting a vendor-generated solution or a respondent-generated solution, whatever terminology works for your org, it doesn't replace any other submission that may have to do with value or risk or other considerations. It will be allowed to be included as part of the interview if they choose to submit one of these types of solution options. So you want to ask more questions about it, of what they thought, that can be done. One of the keys of this, and I can see an autocorrect mistake here. One of the keys is selecting the right types of projects, that this idea of letting the vendors have an opportunity to completely restructure some aspect of the scope or a contract. Oh, wow, Jake, so fast. Is key. So it needs to be the right size of project to justify the effort it will take to do this. The right complexity, and complexity is just a buzzword. That means lots of different things. Have the right factors and aspects around the project. and specifically internal alignment of what the organization's trying to achieve. That's probably the hardest one to accomplish. Next one, Jake. So as a sample matrix of what this would look like, and this is from a real project. So there was an intent to propose form that was pass-fail. They had their quals, that was 15%, a project plan or approach that was 15%, a risk plan, a pricing matrix that was a standard template for all the base conditions, and then a respondent-generated solution that was optional, not scored. They had a diversity goal, and then an interview, and then they had a whole batch of other submission forms that were just required for this entity. And those are all pass-fail. So this is some of the wording. Now, again, I would not copy and paste this. I'm going to go through a couple examples, but like this is just it's very simple to do, but it's not simple to execute. So this example, this was from a solicitation, have the opportunity to recommend an optional solution to meet the goals. This form is considered a blank slate where respondents are not restricted to the statement of work or contract as written. Any submission will be held in confidence and not shared. Respondents should describe the recommended difference from the statement of work, contract, and the benefits impact they bring to the organization. Okay, that's one example. Here's another one where we did it just in the financial aspect of the submission. And I'm going to walk through this one in more detail. So financial proposal should be based on current service requirements listed in section 5.3. Include review as value-added options, blah, blah, blah. The financial proposal will be the final proposal and will not be negotiated. All vendors must fill out the financial proposal worksheets. There are 3 financial proposal worksheets to complete. Option A, 10-year contract term. This was an existing in-house service they were outsourcing. So retain all current employees. Option B was a financial model where the vendor provided their solution for how they were going to treat current employees. And option C was the vendor does whatever they want. Do new contract term, new structure. There was a lot of capital investment in this agreement. This was a revenue-based agreement. And so again, no names, standard CP practice. Templates, the templates are pretty simple. They're blank pages. Sometimes there's a little bit of structure, but even the one that had the structure, they were able to delete everything they wanted to. So very simple template. They just basically get two blank pages, sometimes one blank page, and they're allowed to lay out a plan. And that plan, if they submit it, can become the basis of a detailed negotiation if they're selected to reshape the contract and scope around that submission. And that's the legal allowance that the lawyers that have allowed this, not all lawyers will let this happen. That if everyone had the chance to submit it and it's part of the base submission, it can be used in the contract development and finalization. And that's the legal justification. So here's some more of the details of the warnings. So for this to be successful, the organization and the team and the internal politics must be focused mentally. They must have the right, just like vibe of doing what's best for the organization as the highest priority. That is not always the case. So like when Jake and I are working with groups, if we don't think they're internally aligned and there's little, side quest going on, and it's not all about making the project or the service or the contract as beneficial as possible for the taxpayers, let's say, we don't even bring this up as an option. Okay, so most orgs, I would say 70% are not in a position to try to do something like this. It requires extensive vendor education. Most will not understand what you're asking. And it requires extensive internal education. So the concept is simple, but when you start to get into the details, it gets harder and harder to answer all the questions. The other thing is it may require significant internal humility. So what has happened in 90% of the times that we've done this is an innovation comes forward that explicitly undermines the capability and skill of the people internally that have been doing it a certain way or had a vendor and contract in a certain way historically. and it results in the realization there's been lost opportunity. So in the excitement of the benefit, it undermines people's opinion of the current skill set of the people that are running it internally. So there's a big downside politically sometimes if this isn't done right. In general, the most supportive people are the lawyers. The least supportive people are people in the operations side or the execution side internally that have been managing the contract or the vendor prior. Yes, Kirby, I would say. I mean, completely aligned. So not just happy places to work, Kirby, but completely aligned, where they're aligned internally, politically. I don't think there's that many. I mean, that's just my experience. If not done right, it can make things worse, and it can cause more friction on the downside. So this is not just everything goes great no matter what you do. It's not just a copy paste and move forward. Next slide, Jake. This is a classic video, if you haven't seen it, where they give a kid a lightsaber and he starts swinging around for Christmas, and he cuts grandma in half, cuts down the tree, cuts down the lamp. So a lightsaber is great, but it can be very dangerous if not used properly. Okay, so that was Jake's idea to put the video in there, right, Jake? I'm just kidding. Jake said it might not go over well. So, all right. So first case study, this is a materials recycling facility for a very large city, top 5 large city, one of the top 5 largest cities in the US. So this is a big contract. Next slide. So the RFP was pretty advanced, was not just a standard RFP. Before doing this, we held 8 internal client trainings and 2 external vendor trainings prior to RFP release. We had several sessions. We made videos. They had the mayor on board. We had the lead general counsel for the city on board. We did an additional 1-hour training at the pre-proposal meeting around how to respond to the solicitation. There were several advanced processes, not just the VGS. All the major firms that provide this service participated. So there were 6 responses. They were shortlisted at top 3 for interviews. Only 2 out of the 6 partook of the option to submit a vendor-generated solution. Okay, next slide. The winning firm had the best proposal. It was 40% better than the next closest. Second best interview. They were 3. That's just because of one person. We interviewed several people, but it was neck and neck. I mean, 3% difference from first, so just a couple points. Second lowest base cost, but it was fractions. It was not a big difference. The best references, and they had a vendor-generated solution the city wanted to explore. So they were number 1 in the model, I think by about, I should have kept it up, but I think it was by about 17 points. So it clear there was not any type of dispute of who should win. And that was all on the base submission. So there was the VGS was not, it was read, but it was not evaluated. It was not scored. It was not in the matrix. Okay, the prior contract structure and methodology in the city had been in place is over 25 years. So multiple decades. It's fee and tonnage based. There was some revenue from the sale of materials, but it was a net loss to the city every year, their recycling program. It was a base 3-year agreement +1+1, so a 5-year total. Very labor intensive, super high turnover. The average employee lasted less than 7 days. I went to the facility there's multiple, but the main facility a couple times. And like the first belt is going 40 miles an hour. And there's just lines of people just trying to grab different types of recycling, just throwing it over their heads. Guys behind them trying to catch it and put it into different bins. And they would go, and then the day I was there, the first day I was there, there's supposed to be like 5 or 6 people at the glass. There's like green glass, clear glass, brown glass, and they were sorting it by hand. Only one guy showed up that day, and there's just glass flying, shattering everywhere. It was a disaster. They had a separate, so they would package these, they were baling cardboard when I was there. So they package these things in different bales and different things. And then there's a separate crew whose job is to pull out all the stuff from the exterior of these bales. And they're like, I don't know, 14, maybe 10, 14 feet by like, they're big. They're these huge bundles, and pull out like the plastic's not supposed to, or metal is sticking out. And this is a whole separate crew because it's so bad at sorting it. You get everything mixed together, but you'll sell it as a cardboard bundle. Same two key people have been running it for over 20 years. And in the interviews, one of the questions we asked was like, what's the reputation of the city's quality for the recycled materials that they sell? And 100% said of the three people who were interviewed, the three firms, they said you don't have a good reputation. You're known as having poor quality recycling if you're going to buy from you. Next slide, Jake. So the base contract was the same as it always has been. That's what was competed. The vendor generated solution. The vendor came in, and this became the contract. They said, do not make this a fee-based agreement. We propose have a revenue-based agreement. The city does not pay us, and we propose there'll be $80 million in revenue. We're going to focus on increasing the quality of the recycling outputs and turn this into a revenue center for the city. We want a 10-year agreement. We will invest $7 million in new technology and minimize the number of people at the site and begin to automate the facility. So these were new types of sorters. They put in some like these laser optical readers, these like magnet belts where they spin over it and pull certain metals up. Some different packaging technology, et cetera. They had a whole breakdown of different floors and ceiling rates for thresholds of like if the prices internationally drop to this level or they go up this level, and it was all benefiting. So if it becomes more valuable, it benefits the client. There was some shared risk if the bottom falls out of the market, and that's how it was structured. And this put in place an incentive where before the city did recycling just as like a thing they did because it was expected, to now it's like, if our citizens do more recycling, we can make more money as a city. Next. So it took a little bit of work, but ended up the most supportive person that I had and we had a huge meeting of like 25 of the key people, the top of City Hall, this big skyscraper. The most supportive person and happiest was the key general counsel, the lead guy for the city. He loved the contract. And in the meeting, there was a bunch of like, not contention, but it was not completely aligned. And he's like, don't you guys get it? We have no risk. The vendor wrote their own agreement. There's no downside. So he was easily the happiest person in the room. The two main operators that had run it were completely against it. They didn't like it. They badmouthed it. They said it wasn't going to work. The mayor was extremely happy, but very frustrated. And he mentioned, because this brought up, why have we been doing this wrong for 20 years? And like, everyone's like, well, we don't blame you guys. We don't blame, but like that's what was happening, right? You're starting to see all these things. And this was not like the first city to do this. So they implemented it. It went really well. The mayor wanted this approach that we were doing, and not just this vendor, but wanted our processes put on all their other major contracts. And the pushback was gigantic. And so because it just really shook things up, and there's several reasons for that, but that was what happened at the end of the day. So very innovative, good for one contract. There's a lot of pushback. Definitely changed how things were being done, all the existing structures, all the existing financial models, and a lot of the ways that the relationship of the vendors with the city. And it was a new vendor. So the one that had been there for a long time was gone. Okay, next one. Okay, another one. So this was a large university bookstore, and I put this one because this was a really complex. It had been internally run for over 100 years. The bookstore, of course, is the textbooks plus retail and other books. They had, computers and IT and software and things that they sold, and then clothing. There was obviously existing inventory, different arguments about how much that was worth, hundreds of employees. The director that ran the bookstore had been at the university for 39 years. Now, the university had been working with our team for over 7 years. They had all gone through our online courses, our advanced processes, our 2 different college courses. We'd certified like half their procurement department. We'd run over $2 billion in projects with us. But even then, what we were trying to do at this bookstore took 4 trainings and multiple meetings to grasp the details of what we were looking at. So let's kind of look at the details. So the first question we asked was, do we even need a bookstore? So are we going to go full digital? Are we going to go tablets? How's this going to work? So we did RFI. We did like an RFI, interview process. We brought in Apple, Google, Microsoft, Amazon, and this was a large university, very, very large university. So they had, they had enough pull. After all of that, it was decided that yes, you still need a physical bookstore. You still need bricks and mortar. Okay, the next question was, should we outsource it or should we try to improve it ourselves? So obviously the existing people had been there for a long time. They had a lot of political pull, and they were one of the larger employers on campus in terms of just total number of students and staff that were under their budget. So we decided to go ahead and solicit to the market, and then whatever the market came back with, the internal people would be allowed to create their own proposal to beat it after they saw what was submitted. So there was a dual evaluation. There was an external one and then an internal one. And the evaluators, which not a fan of this, but this was very political, obviously a lot of history. So the provost was on the committee and the majority of the executive vice presidents. The bookstore director did not support outsourcing, obviously. Ran the full RFP. There's only 2 firms large enough for this at the time. Both proposed, and the VGS was only included in the financial model for the proposal. So we gave them 3 templates. One was, and I mentioned this in the previous structure, this is the language, 10-year term, retain all employees for 2 years, 10-year term, vendor decides, and then the C was, you do whatever you want. Create your own contract structure, your own financial terms. Next slide. So both vendors, either of them could have done it. They had awesome teams, super high in every category. The money was extremely close. The base financial conditions, A and B, very close. The internal response eventually was not even close. They actually stopped doing it because they could not compete. The slightly higher score also had the most innovative vendor generated solution that ended up being completely adopted. It improved the contract terms, added some optional years. It included a large capital investment to build a separate location. So they proposed, the existing bookstore had been around forever, and it was right in the heart of campus. They said, let's update that one and move it to a more robust textbook and student-focused facility, because the facility was ancient. And then we will put a new facility, ended up being the first 2 floors of another building was being built soon, near the main kind of heart corridor of the campus that runs up to the stadium where a lot of the social and activities are. And we'll make this one focused on selling merchandise and hitting up parents and alumni when they come in for a football game or a basketball game, and all the stadiums and everything are all together, a baseball game, whatever it is. And they also purchased all the existing inventory. They also wanted to add an online ordering system, an ebook system, a rental option for students. They didn't have to buy anymore. And they added these machines that were like print on demand. It's like an actual textbook, print on demand with the hardcover and everything. I didn't know that existed. The other thing they did is they they took every employee and they called it a human-centric model, where they looked at everyone and how close they were to retirement. And instead of doing like a swath, they just said, okay, if you're, I can't remember what the number was, like 2 or 3 years from retirement, they stayed an ASU employee and they maintained their employment, and then the rest were transferred. Everyone had an option of what they wanted to do. And then the university had laid out all their scope and had laid out their schedule of when they wanted to transfer everything. And the vendor's like, this is not, why are you guys doing it this way? We're not sure. And, they said, we don't know, we just made it up. And the vendor's like, well, here's our plan. And so they adopted all of the vendors' dates. Okay. So it went really, really well. And in this case, the originally, in opposition director became the biggest supporter. All the key leadership was happy. And it was interesting. They were very gracious and humble, the existing bookstore leadership. And they had just heard of bad things at other places, and they were unaware of a lot of the techniques and approaches the vendor was taking. The only thing that was tough is, people were no longer like state employees, and now they're becoming employees of a big corporation. And so at least the staff, the students didn't care, but there was a big chunk of staff. And so that was watched very closely. They were giving promotion opportunities. And so, I knew one of them personally. We stayed friends, and he's happier now than he was, but it took a couple of years to kind of understand it. It wasn't going to, disrupt his life too much. Next slide. So in summary, project selection is key. Very careful how you do it. It's not easy to get everyone aligned internally. It does require extensive education and potentially smoothing, but not all lawyers will be okay with this. The lawyers really have to be on board first. That's the first one to do it. And in the end of the day, you're just looking for one to have a great idea. It doesn't hurt if you don't adopt anything, but the output can be amazing. I've run it where, no one had a great idea, and you just keep the base package. So it's not a foolproof, but that is what that is. That's the vendor generated solution, an option to release control. And that's it.
This has been Ask the RFP Doctor, brought to you by the Center for Procurement Excellence.